She wasn't running from danger, she was the danger. Too Late for Tears didn't just flip film noir on its head, it twisted the knife. A bag of cash falls into the wrong car, and instead of fear, there's greed. Pure, cold, deadly greed. But behind the shadows and the femme fatale smile, nothing went as planned. The star nearly walked off set. The money bag was real, and one scene, it was so dark the censors almost killed the entire film. These are 20 weird facts about Too Late for Tears. And tucked in the chaos, a bonus fact about how this noir classic vanished for 50 years and almost never came back. Buckle up, this ride gets dark fast. Number 1. Too Late for Tears had a title problem before a single frame was shot. The original name wasn't mysterious or noir at all. It was called Killer Bait, a pulp thriller title that screamed cheap paperback. The studio hated it. Test audiences laughed at it. Critics said it sounded like a fishing manual. So they scrambled for alternatives. They tried The Devil's Cargo, Dark Passage of Greed, even Night Without Mercy. But nothing stuck. Then someone suggested Too Late for Tears, a line that didn't appear anywhere in the actual script, but somehow captured everything. The desperation, the inevitability, the sense that once you grab that money, there's no going back. The studio approved it reluctantly, thinking it was too poetic, too soft for a thriller. But when the film hit theaters, that title became its strongest asset. It promised doom without showing it. It whispered instead of screamed. And audiences, they leaned in closer because sometimes the quietest threat is the one that cuts deepest. In a genre filled with guns and grit, Too Late for Tears won by being haunting. Number 2. Lizabeth Scott wasn't the first choice to play Jane Palmer. The studio wanted someone more established, someone with star power and box office recognition. They offered it to Joan Bennett first, fresh off success in other noir films. She read the script, loved the darkness, but turned it down. Too evil, she said. The character had no redemption arc, no moment of conscience, just pure ambition wrapped in a smile. Next came Ida Lupino, a powerhouse actress who wasn't afraid of difficult roles. She said yes initially, even started costume fittings. Then she read the ending and backed out. Her reason? She didn't want audiences to hate her that much. So the role landed with Lizabeth Scott, a rising star known for playing vulnerable women caught in bad situations. But Scott saw something different in Jane Palmer. She didn't play her as a victim who turns. She played her as someone who was always this way, just waiting for the right moment to show it. And that choice, it made the film unforgettable. Because the scariest monsters aren't the ones who change, they're the ones who were there all along.
I told him you were here yesterday, the police...
Number 3. The infamous money bag wasn't a prop. It was filled with real cash. Not fake bills, not cut paper. Actual United States currency totaling $60,000 in mixed denominations. The studio claimed it was for authenticity, to make sure the actors reacted with genuine weight and texture, but the real reason was darker. The film's budget was so tight they couldn't afford to print convincing fake money that would pass scrutiny on camera, so they borrowed real money from a local bank with an armed guard stationed off-camera during every scene involving the bag. The insurance policy alone cost more than some of the actors' salaries, and it changed everything. Lizabeth Scott later admitted that holding real money made her performance sharper. The way she clutched it, counted it, hid it, it wasn't acting. It was instinct. Don Arthur, playing her husband, said it felt wrong taking direction to throw around actual cash. Between takes, the bag was locked in a safe. At night, armed security transported it back to the bank. For a film about greed destroying lives, the production was drowning in the real thing. And somehow, no one ever stole a single bill. Number 4. The movie's most chilling scene almost got the film banned entirely. Midway through, Jane Palmer does something unthinkable. She doesn't just threaten. She follows through with cold calculation. The censors at the Production Code Administration flagged it immediately. Too brutal, they said. Too premeditated. Too devoid of remorse. They demanded cuts, reshoots, anything to soften the blow. Director Byron Haskin refused. He told them the scene was the heart of the film, the moment that reveals who Jane really is. Without it, The movie was just another thriller. With it, it was something darker, something true. The studio panicked. They offered compromises, shadows, off-screen sound, implied violence. But Haskin held firm. Finally, they reached a compromise. The scene would stay, but with one change. A reaction shot, just 2 seconds, showing Jane's face after the act. Not remorse, but acknowledgement. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get past the censors. When test audiences saw it, they sat in stunned silence. Some walked out. Others stayed glued to their seats, unable to look away. That scene didn't just push boundaries, it redrew them.
What have you got in the bag? It weighs a ton.
There are no cigarettes in there.
Number 5. Don DeFore, playing the good guy Danny Fuller, almost quit during production. Not because of the script or the hours, but because of Lizabeth Scott. Off-screen, she was kind, professional, easy to work with. But the moment cameras rolled, she became Jane Palmer completely. Cold, manipulative, calculating. And it unnerved him. During their confrontation scenes, she wouldn't break character between takes. She'd hold the stare, keep the edge in her voice, maintain the threat. DeFore later said it felt like working with someone genuinely dangerous. He'd go home at night still feeling her eyes on him. At one point, he pulled the director aside and asked if Scott was okay. Haskin laughed and told him that was the performance of a lifetime happening right in front of him. But DeFore couldn't shake it. In the film's climax, when they face off for the final time, his fear wasn't scripted. It was real, and you can see it in every frame. The tremor in his voice, the hesitation in his movement, the way he looks at her like she might actually do it, because in that moment, he believed she would. Scott never apologized for the intensity. She said if Jane Palmer was going to be a monster, she had to commit completely.
What's the matter with you?
That's just to remind you, honey.
Number 6. The film's cinematographer, William C. Meller, hated shooting in black and white. He was known for lush Technicolor work, vibrant landscapes, rich tones. Being assigned to a noir thriller felt like punishment. He complained constantly during pre-production, arguing that the story would be stronger in color, that audiences were moving away from monochrome. The studio ignored him. Noir meant shadows, and shadows meant black and white. So Meller did something rebellious. He decided if he had to shoot in black and white, he'd make it the darkest, most shadowed noir ever filmed. He pushed contrast to extremes. Faces disappeared into darkness. Light became a weapon, not an accent. Some scenes were lit so low that the lab called to confirm the exposure wasn't a mistake. Haskin loved it. He told Meller to go darker, and Meller did. The result was a film where characters could barely be seen, where every frame felt suffocating, claustrophobic, dangerous. Critics later called it one of the most visually oppressive noirs of the era, and Meller, who'd fought against the format, ended up creating one of its most striking examples. Sometimes the best art comes from fighting the medium. Number 7. Arthur Kennedy's casting as the slimy blackmailer Danny Fuller wasn't about talent, it was about timing. Kennedy was a respected stage actor making the transition to film, known for playing honest, earnest characters, the complete opposite of what the role required. But during his audition, something strange happened. He read the part straight. No flourishes, no villain voice, just calm menace. The producers sat in silence. Then one of them said it. He doesn't sound threatening. He sounds real. And that was the problem with most noir villains. They telegraphed evil. Kennedy played Danny Fuller like a man doing a job. No passion, no rage, just business. It made him infinitely more terrifying. During filming, Kennedy refused to play any scene for sympathy. Even when Danny's getting desperate, Kennedy kept him cold, transactional, always calculating the angle. The other actors found it disturbing. Lizabeth Scott said working with him felt like being circled by a shark. You couldn't see the danger until it was too late. And that's exactly what made the character work. He wasn't a monster. He was a man without empathy, which somehow felt worse. Kennedy later said it was the most exhausting role of his career because maintaining that emotional emptiness day after day drained something from him. Number 8. The car used in the opening sequence wasn't supposed to be part of the plot at all. It was the director's personal vehicle, a 1946 Chrysler Town & Country convertible he drove to set every day. The production designer asked to borrow it for one establishing shot. something to show the couple driving through the Hollywood Hills. Haskin agreed. But when they filmed the sequence where the money bag gets thrown into the wrong car, something clicked. The car itself became a character. That wooden paneling, those leather seats, the top-down vulnerability. It wasn't just transportation, it was a trap. The studio loved the look so much they built the entire opening around that specific car. But there was a problem. Haskin was still driving it home every night, and the script required scenes where it gets damaged, scratched, dented during desperate escapes. Haskin refused to let them touch his actual car, so the prop department built an exact replica for the stunts, but they kept the real car for close-ups. If you watch carefully, you can spot the differences between the hero car and the stunt double. The real car has a scratch on the passenger door that vanishes in wide shots, a tiny imperfection that became a continuity error, all because the director loved his ride too much. Number 9. One of the film's most effective plot devices came from a production mistake. Early in the story, Jane Palmer switches her husband's luggage tag to hide evidence. It's a small detail, barely noticeable, but it sets up a crucial revelation later. That wasn't in the original script. During rehearsal, a prop assistant accidentally grabbed the wrong suitcase for a scene. Lizabeth Scott noticed, improvised swapping the tags, and kept going. Byron Haskin saw it happen and yelled, "Cut." But instead of resetting, he pulled the screenwriter over and said they just found their missing piece. The screenplay had a plot hole. How does Jane keep her husband from discovering the truth about the money? The luggage switch solved it elegantly. They rewrote scenes around that moment, making it intentional, calculated. The screenwriter added dialogue that called back to it, and suddenly a simple mistake became one of the film's smartest touches. Test audiences praised that detail specifically, noting how it showed Jane's quick thinking and attention to detail. The production code reviewers didn't even flag it, and none of them knew it was born from someone grabbing the wrong prop. Sometimes the best screenwriting happens by accident. Number 10. The film's ending was shot 3 different ways because nobody could agree which one was right. The first version was dark, nihilistic, true to the noir tradition. No redemption, no justice, just consequences. Test audiences hated it. They felt cheated, angry, manipulated. The second version added a conventional Hollywood resolution. Good triumphs, evil punished, lessons learned. The crew hated it. It felt fake, forced, completely out of step with everything that came before. So they shot a third version. Something in between. Not quite happy, not quite hopeless, just inevitable. That's the one that made it to theaters. But here's the strange part. For years, rumors persisted that the original dark ending existed somewhere in the studio vaults. Film historians searched for it. Noir enthusiasts debated what it might have contained. Some claimed they'd seen it at early screenings, but no footage was ever found. Either it was destroyed, lost, or maybe it never existed outside of script pages. The ending we have, it works. It's haunting, ambiguous, perfectly noir. But somewhere in the back of every viewer's mind, there's that question. What if they'd kept the darkness? Number 11. Too Late for Tears had a secret weapon that nobody talked about during production: the score. Composer Roy Webb had worked on over 300 films, mostly forgettable background work. But for this one, he did something different. He recorded the entire score before filming began. Not after, like every other movie. Before. Director Byron Haskin wanted the actors to hear the music while they performed, to let it influence their timing, their mood, their energy. It was a bizarre request. Studios didn't work that way. Music came last, fitted to the picture, not the other way around. But Webb agreed to try it. He composed themes for each character. Jane got strings that felt like silk hiding knives. Danny got horns that sounded like whispered threats. The husband got woodwinds, sad and doomed. During filming, they played the score on set between takes. Actors would listen, absorb, then perform. Lizabeth Scott said it changed everything. She could hear Jane's theme and feel the character's cold calculation wash over her. The music wasn't accompaniment, it was a collaborator. When the film was edited, most of Webb's original score stayed intact because the performances were already built around it. Critics praised the seamless integration of music and image, never knowing it was created backward. And Webb, he never did it again. Too risky, too expensive, too strange. But for one film, He proved that sometimes you have to hear the ending before you can play the beginning. Number 12. The pool scene wasn't supposed to exist. It wasn't in the script, wasn't in the budget, wasn't planned at all. But 3 weeks into shooting, Lizabeth Scott mentioned to Haskin that Jane Palmer never seemed vulnerable, never showed fear even when cornered. The character was so calculating that audiences might disconnect from her completely. Haskin thought about it for days. Then one night he had an idea. Water. Jane needed to be submerged, literally and figuratively. He pitched a pool scene to the studio. They said no immediately. Not in the budget, not in the schedule, not happening. But Haskin was obsessed. He scouted locations on his own time, found a private residence with a perfect pool, dark, moody, surrounded by shadows. He negotiated directly with the owner, got it for free in exchange for a screen credit. Then he went back to the studio with a complete plan. One-night shoot, skeleton crew, no extra costs beyond overtime. They reluctantly agreed. The scene was shot in 6 hours straight through the night. One camera, minimal lighting, Lizabeth Scott in the water for take after take. She later said it was the coldest, most miserable night of her career. But on screen, it's mesmerizing. Jane, fully clothed, submerged, gasping, finally showing something real. That scene became one of the film's most memorable moments, and it almost never happened. Number 13. Don Arthur, playing Jane's husband, Alan Palmer, had the most thankless role in film noir history. He was supposed to be decent, honest, boring, the kind of man who does everything right and loses everything anyway. Arthur hated it. Between takes, he'd complain to anyone who'd listen. Where's my character arc? Where's my moment? Why am I just the obstacle? The other actors avoided him, but Lizabeth Scott understood his frustration. She pulled him aside one day and told him something that changed his performance. "You're not the obstacle," she said. "You're the last piece of her humanity, and the moment she destroys you, there's nothing left." Arthur thought about that. He stopped trying to make Alan interesting and started playing him as deeply, almost painfully ordinary. A good man who never saw it coming. And that ordinariness became devastating. When Jane betrays him, it doesn't feel like plot mechanics, it feels like murder. Because Arthur played Alan as someone real, someone who existed in a normal world, not a noir. His final scene where he realizes what she's become, he doesn't overact. He just deflates. The confusion in his eyes, the quiet heartbreak, it's one of the most human moments in a film full of monsters. Arthur never got recognition for the performance. Critics barely mentioned him, but without his grounding presence, Jane Palmer's descent wouldn't have mattered. Evil needs goodness to destroy, and Arthur gave her plenty. Number 14. The film's most famous line, "I want it all and I want it now," wasn't in the script. It was improvised during the fourth take of a confrontation scene between Jane and Danny. Lizabeth Scott was supposed to say something about needing security, a careful line that explained her motivation. But she'd been thinking about Jane for weeks, understanding her deeper. On that fourth take, the scripted line felt wrong, too soft, too apologetic, so she changed it. 3 words that summed up everything. The director didn't yell cut, the camera kept rolling. The other actor stayed in character, reacted naturally. When Haskin finally called cut, he walked over to Scott and asked where that came from. She didn't know. It just felt right. The screenwriter loved it so much he rewrote surrounding dialogue to emphasize it. That line became the thesis of the entire film. Not "I need money," not "I deserve better." I want it all. No justification, no excuse, just raw desire stripped of pretense. Audiences remembered it. Critics quoted it. Years later, it would be referenced in other films, echoed by other characters. 3 words that captured the dark heart of noir. Greed isn't complex. It's simple, direct, and absolutely ruthless. And sometimes the most honest writing comes from an actor who stops pretending. Number 15. Too Late for Tears featured one of the earliest examples of a female character completely dominating a noir narrative. Traditionally, the femme fatale seduced, manipulated, and ultimately got caught or killed. She was dangerous, but not in control. Jane Palmer flipped that entirely. She drove every decision, orchestrated every move, and stayed 10 steps ahead of everyone. The Production Code Administration noticed. They sent multiple notes to the studio expressing concern that Jane showed no remorse, faced no moral reckoning until the very end, and worse, seemed to be enjoying herself. They worried audiences, especially women, might find her too sympathetic, too empowering in all the wrong ways. The studio assured them Jane would face justice eventually. But the PCA wasn't satisfied. They wanted earlier moments showing her internal struggle, signs of conscience, anything to make her less purely evil. Byron Haskin refused every suggestion. He told them that's exactly the point. Jane Palmer wasn't struggling with morality. She'd made her choice before the money even arrived. The struggle was external, practical, how to keep what she'd taken. After weeks of back and forth, the PCA approved it with conditions, but they flagged it internally as potentially problematic. They were right to worry. When the film was released, some female viewers loved Jane Palmer. Not despite her villainy, but because of her absolute refusal to apologize for wanting more. Number 16. The movie was shot in just 23 days, a brutally tight schedule even for 1949. Most noir films had 4 to 6 weeks minimum, but the studio saw Too Late for Tears as a B picture, something to fill the bottom half of a double feature. So they gave it a B budget and a B schedule. Byron Haskin was furious but determined. He pre-blocked every scene before arriving on set, rehearsed actors during lunch breaks, and shot most sequences in 1 or 2 takes maximum. The cast worked 6-day weeks, 12-hour days. There was no time for experimentation, no room for creative exploration. You showed up, knew your lines, hit your marks, and moved on. Lizabeth Scott later said it was the most exhausting 3 weeks of her life. But strangely, the pace worked in the film's favor. That rushed, breathless quality, the sense that everything's happening too fast, that no one has time to think, it's baked into every frame. The performances feel urgent, raw, unpolished in the best way. Nobody had time to overthink anything. They just did it, and that immediate, instinctive energy became one of the film's greatest strengths. Sometimes, limitations force excellence. The movie was shot in 23 days. It's been remembered for 75 years. Number 17. One of the film's supporting actors was literally dying during production. Christine Miller, playing Kathy Palmer, Alan's sister, was battling a serious illness she'd kept hidden from the studio. She needed the work, needed the paycheck, and knew if anyone found out, she'd be replaced immediately. So she showed up every day, delivered her performance, and told no one. Between takes, she'd disappear to her dressing room. The makeup department noticed she was getting thinner, paler, but assumed it was intentional for the role. Her character was supposed to be worried, stressed, exhausted. Miller's real suffering made it authentic. There's one scene where Kathy breaks down, overcome by everything happening around her. Miller's tears weren't acting. She later admitted she was crying because she didn't know if she'd live to see the film released. The irony wasn't lost on her, playing a character surrounded by death while facing it herself. Miller survived. The illness eventually went into remission. But watching her performance, knowing what she was going through, it adds a layer of tragedy the filmmakers never intended. She gave everything to that role because she thought it might be her last. And that desperation, that raw honesty, it's there in every scene. Number 18. The film's ending, which takes place on a foggy lakeside dock, was shot on a studio backlot with zero fog. Not a wisp. It was late summer in California. Impossibly clear skies, harsh sunlight. The script called for heavy fog, that classic noir atmosphere where you can barely see what's coming. But the budget had no room for expensive fog machines or dry ice. The effects department panicked. Haskin told them to shoot it anyway. He'd fix it later. But how? Post-production fog effects in 1949 were primitive at best. They tested various techniques, everything from double exposure to painted glass mats. Nothing worked convincingly. Then someone remembered an old trick from silent films. They could create fog optically by running the negative through a chemical bath that would lighten and diffuse the image, creating a hazy effect. It was risky. One mistake and the entire sequence would be ruined with no way to reshoot it. They tried it on a test frame. It looked perfect, soft, mysterious, dangerous. They processed the whole sequence. The result is that eerie, dreamlike quality in the finale, where nothing feels quite real, where the darkness seems alive. Film historians still praise the atmospheric fog in that scene. None of them know it was an accident solved by chemistry, not cinematography. Number 19. After Too Late for Tears wrapped, the film vanished. Not immediately, but gradually. It played theaters in 1949, got decent reviews, made modest money, then it disappeared. The studio, United Artists, handled distribution strangely. They licensed it to television early, flooding the market with cheap prints. By the 1960s, it was a staple of late-night TV, local stations running battered, scratched copies at 2 a.m. But the original negative, the master materials, they were gone. Nobody knew where. Some said destroyed in a warehouse fire. Others claimed they were lost during a studio merger. For decades, the only versions available were those terrible TV prints, each generation worse than the last. Film preservation societies tried to restore it, but without source material, it was impossible. By the 1990s, Too Late for Tears was considered a lost film. Noir historians wrote about it in past tense. Then in 1999, 50 years after release, a UCLA Film Archive researcher found something in an uncatalogued box. An original 35mm print, pristine, barely screened, forgotten in a storage facility. It wasn't the negative, but it was close enough. They restored it frame by frame, painstaking work that took years. In 2012, the restored version premiered at a film festival. Audiences saw it as it was meant to be seen. Sharp, clear, devastating. A film that vanished came back from the dead. Number 20. Lizabeth Scott's career never recovered from playing Jane Palmer. She'd hoped the role would make her a star, prove her range, open bigger opportunities. Instead, she got typecast as cold, dangerous women. Studios saw her as the woman who'd do anything for money on screen and assumed that was who she was. Job offers came, but they were all variations of Jane Palmer. Femme fatales, murderers, schemers, never the lead, never sympathetic. Scott tried to break away. She took roles in comedies, romances, dramas, but audiences couldn't unsee Jane Palmer. That performance was too powerful, too complete, too unforgettable. By the mid-1950s, her career had stalled. She worked sporadically, mostly television, supporting roles, nothing that mattered. She retired from acting in 1972, bitter about how one perfect performance had trapped her. In interviews decades later, she had mixed feelings about Too Late for Tears. She was proud of the work, proud of Jane Palmer, but she also resented how that character consumed everything else she'd ever done. When she died in 2015, her obituaries led with Jane Palmer. 70 years later, she was still defined by one role, one performance, one woman who wanted it all. Sometimes being too good at something becomes its own prison. Bonus fact. The money bag from the film, the real one filled with $60,000, survived for decades after production wrapped. The bank wanted it back immediately, but the prop department had modified it, added wear, made it look used and dangerous. So the studio reimbursed the bank and kept the bag. For years it sat in the United Artists prop warehouse, occasionally used in other films, always carrying fake money after that first production. Then in the 1970s, during a studio liquidation sale, someone bought it at auction for $35. They had no idea what it was, just thought it looked cool. That bag passed through 3 estate sales, 1 garage sale, and ended up in a thrift store in Burbank. In 2019, a film memorabilia collector bought it for $5, recognized the unique wear pattern from production stills, and authenticated it. Today, it sits in a private collection insured for $50,000. A bag that once held $60,000 in real cash caused murders on screen and drove one of Noir's greatest characters to destruction, worth less than what it carried. But its real value was never the money. It was the darkness it revealed in everyone who touched it.